I got the Buffalo Bills getting a big-time upset over the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'll explain why on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso, with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today, as I am every Friday, by Locked On NFL expert, the mastermind, Ross Jackson. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the most recent updates on all the open head coaching positions in the NFL, including the Dallas Cowboys disaster situation. Then we'll move to the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders, a battle of two quarterbacks in two different spots right now. But we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills against the Kansas City Chiefs. And yes, I think the Buffalo Bills will get the upset. Before we get into that, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Ross, I've been on the Chiefs all week, but I've changed my mind. I'm going with the Buffalo Bills plus 1.5 to get the upset.
Welcome, Tyler, to the good place, because I'm right there with you, buddy.
Absolutely. And one of the primary reasons that we think the upset is coming is because of the Buffalo Bills' ability to run the football. My guy Joe Marino talked about exactly that on this week's Crossover Thursday with Locked On Bills and Locked On Chiefs.
Yeah, I think number one's running the football. The Bills have a very dynamic rushing offense. So far in this playoff run, they tagged the Broncos and the Ravens for the most rushing yards they've given up all season long. 147 against Baltimore, 210 against Denver, and those were great run defenses this year. Number 2 and number 3 in EPA defending the run this season, and the Bills were able to have literally the best rushing performance that they've had all season against those teams. And you know, there's some really unique dynamics here with, of course, the Bills in the postseason and the appetite to run Josh Allen. That'll be a big factor, in addition to Spencer Brown, who's really become a high-level right tackle, in particular run blocking. He wasn't available in Week 11. And look, the Chiefs' run defense has absolutely been slumping. When these teams hooked up in Week 11, they were number 4 in EPA defending the run. They finished the season number 11. They gave up, 158 or 149 to Houston last week, 202 to Pittsburgh, 139 to the Browns. The Raiders can't run the ball on anyone. They got 116. So I think that the Chiefs have a tall order ahead of them to defend this Buffalo rushing offense. I think that's got to be a big part of what Buffalo does on Sunday night.
I got to tell you, Tyler, I'm right there with Joe on that one, man, especially with James Cook. 55.5 rushing yards is the over-under on FanDuel. It feels like one of the easiest bets of the weekend for me. Yes. I love the over on James Cook. I love the Buffalo Bills run game, and I think they're going to be able to control a little bit of this game when it comes to Kansas City because of it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it's going to be one of those moments where we look at the Bills and it's like once they really, truly, finally took enough off of Josh Allen's plate and put it on the rest of the team, it became the best version of their team. They let go of Stephon Diggs. Hey, we don't need a star. We'll do it by committee. Hey, we can't have Josh Allen be a superstar all the time. We need to do it with the offensive line. We need to rely more on the run game. I think all of that puts them in a great position. And like Joe was saying, I mean, Kansas City's run defense and Kansas City's defense in general hasn't been quite as good as they were at times last year. So with the offense being inconsistent the way that it was, like, where were the wide receivers last week? Right. Kansas City isn't playing the way that they need to play, in my opinion. And as a matter of fact, with that being said, my guys from Locked On Chiefs in that Crossover Thursday episode talked about how the Chiefs just need to play more free.
To me, the biggest key in this game is getting the Patrick Mahomes going early and getting the ball to the wide receivers that really weren't used against the Houston Texans. Spread the ball around and make Buffalo defend the entire field. I think that is the biggest key in guaranteeing a win for the Chiefs.
I will put it this way. I would say they have to dare to dream. You can't be this team that's won ugly all season. You can't just sit back and be happy to eat up clock, move the ball, and eventually you're going to punch it in. No. Bills are not going to sit still for that. You have to play as though your life depends on it, because it does. Get out there, go after it, be aggressive on offense, and on defense, you have to keep it fresh. As you said, he's been a little bit predictable, has not gotten home with his especially less exotic blitzes. He will run inversions this week. He will send somebody out of nowhere. You will see looping defenders. The question is, are you looping into where Josh is trying to escape, or are you looping away from him and giving up huge chunks? For me, it's got to stop Cook first. You got to stop Josh second, and you got to play up to your capabilities, not down to expectations. Those are the keys for me.
I just don't want to live in a world where Kansas City is just this team all the time, and all of a sudden they can just be something else in the biggest game of the season. Like, at some point, I just can't buy that. I can't buy they're going to be somebody who they haven't been all year.
Yeah, like their entire offense has been predicated on Patrick Mahomes and the quick pass. That's been their entire offense so far this season. You look at them right now, so far throughout the 2024 season, 83.6% completion percentage on quick passes. It was the highest in the NFL by a wide margin. That's just what they do. Like, they do the dink and dunk thing with Patrick Mahomes. Now, they have to be more aggressive, but are you really going to change who you are in your entire DNA in the AFC Championship game up against the best team that you're going to have played all season in the Buffalo Bills? I couldn't disagree more with the idea that you have to play. You can't play down to expectation. There is no expectation to play to. You're the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, everyone knows who you are. That's who you play as, and that's who you play. Like, if you can't win that way, don't try to change now.
Well, I think the problem that they're going to have is if they try to play that, like, drag down, knock them out, fight you in a phone booth style, Buffalo is just better at it.
Buffalo's better. Yeah, don't do that.
That's why we are going with the Buffalo Bills plus 1.5, because Kansas City, I don't think, can play outside of the way that they've been playing. And the way that they've been playing is a version of what Buffalo is doing, but just not as good. So I think if they're both trying to play that way, then Buffalo clearly has an edge.
Yeah, Usain Bolt, the greatest sprinter in the entire world, never challenged Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to a wrestling match. Why? Because he's not good at that. So don't do that. Like, that's not who you have to be in this situation. If you want to win by being you. Don't win by playing to the other team and trying to match their brand, because you're going to get punched in the mouth, man.
Yeah, I don't see that as a winning strategy. At the end of the day, though, it's hard to count out the magic of Patrick Mahomes. He always seems to find a way to get it done. But after 3 straight times, I just feel like this is the time Buffalo breaks through. But with that being said, we got to talk about the other side of the bracket, because we got a very, very interesting game and a very, very interesting matchup between the two quarterbacks in the NFC. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where Prize Picks comes in. If you love football, you want a chance to win real money while watching the games, Prize Picks is the place for you. With Prize Picks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or you want to cash out quickly. Prize Picks has got you covered. That's why they have over 10 million members and billions in winnings. It's clear that people are loving Prize Picks. I've been playing for a while, and it's an absolute blast. This week, I'm looking at Josh Allen for more than 230 passing yards, maybe Saquon Barkley for more than 1 touchdown. It's so easy to use. You can get paid out in as little as 15 minutes when your picks hit. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, football fans, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL, looking ahead at these conference championship games. A little bit of a FanDuel Friday for you guys where we give out our best bets of the weekend. We both like the Buffalo Bills plus 1.5, looking at an upset there. Might even hit up the money line, plus 108 right? I think we both think that they get the upset. Ross pointed out an over prop for James Cook, 55.5 rushing yards. I love that as well. Buffalo will be able to run the football on Kansas City. But looking at this NFC matchup, and I think the big thing that we need to focus on is the quarterbacks in this game. Can Jayden Daniels be special? Will Jalen Hurts be healthy? That's what they discussed on Crossover Thursday between Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders.
They need to contain Jayden Daniels, like keep him inside the pocket. I feel like at times the Eagles have over pursued on Jayden this year on mobile quarterbacks. It's allowed them to leak outside, make plays outside of structure. I thought that was a big reason Daniels led that comeback the last time these two teams played in DC. So they need to, of course, get pressure on the interior, try to suffocate him and keep him inside the numbers. And then for Jalen Hurts, it's the opposite. Like David, he's got to be able to run. I just do not believe, even with all the weapons they have, the defense they have, the offensive line, and Saquon, if Jalen Hurts cannot move and he is a pocket passer, he's a statue on Sunday, and he just cannot make plays with his legs, I just don't know how they win this football game. I don't. So that I'm going to be really like the most nerve-wracking part of this game. It's not going to be any fourth quarter game-winning drive. It's honestly going to be that first drive that the Eagles are on offense and watching how he's moving. Like that is like the game-changing moment, I think, will be like right from the jump.
I think Louis makes a great point there that you got to watch the start of this game and see how Jalen Hurts is playing. I think this would be a great opportunity for a live bet on FanDuel after you see what Jalen Hurts does. If he looks good in that first drive, then go with the Eagles. If he doesn't, then to go with the Commanders. But without having the benefit of that, I am going to go with the Commanders plus 6.5. I think that Jalen Hurts' mobility is so crucial that I think the Eagles ultimately win the game because their team is so much better, including their defense. But I just can't count on Jalen Hurts and his health right now. And Jayden Daniels is good enough at minimum for a little backdoor cover action. So I'm going to go with the Commanders plus 6.5. But I think the Eagles ultimately win the game and we get Eagles-Bills as the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I kind of think that that's the way that this one goes as well. But I really like the plus 6.5. The last time that these two teams met, Philly actually lost that game 36-33, kept it a little closer. That was towards the end of the season. At an earlier point in the season, it was 18-26. It was an 8-point deficit. But I think that's the biggest that you're going to see out of there. So I think it's somewhere in the middle this time, right? And so I think that Washington can cover that 6.5. I also think another live bet to watch out for in this one, because it's going to be like 40. It's going to be in like the 40s in Philly. We're not looking at the same type of situation like we saw last week in Philly. And so a little bit more of the ground, the passing game going and things like that. If Jalen Hurts looks good on that first drive and he looks all right, 179.5 passing yards is not hard for me to take the over on for him, as long as he's looking good early, like you and Louis were just talking about.
Well, figuring out how he's looking early is going to be a critical key to victory for the Washington Commanders. And my guy David from Locked On Commanders talked about that in the same crossover episode.
Obviously, you got to contain Saquon Barkley, right? It starts there. Every defender is admitting it. Got to be disciplined, all that stuff. If you are going to give up chunk plays against Saquon, give them up early. Don't give them up late, right? It's all about the adjustment factor. Like in the first game, it was Saquon, Kellen Moore, I don't know, whoever you want to give credit to, the O-line, making adjustments against Commanders defense, springing Saquon loose for a couple of big touchdowns. They end up getting the game, winning the game. And in the second game, again, Jalen Hurts' injury plays a big role in this, but Saquon is demolishing them, and they're able to adjust and contain him, and then Washington ends up winning the game. It's really, who comes out swinging the hardest first tends to actually lose this game, which is interesting. Number two, get after Jalen Hurts. Like we just talked about that injury. He's not going to be 100% either way. You got to test it, and you got to figure out just how mobile he is. And the best way to do that is by getting after him and forcing him off the spot, or making him show you that he can't get off the spot.
That's going to be critical because, to me, Jalen Hurts is not, a guy who can win consistently as a pocket passer. He needs to extend plays. He needs to be involved in the quarterback run game. That helps Saquon too. So much of his game and his effectiveness is predicated on the mobility that if he doesn't have it, I will be certainly worried. And you wonder also about the run defense if Jalen Hurts isn't there. I mean, you look at what the Lions did in the last game against the Washington Commanders. They were still able to run for 201 yards. Like, the Eagles' defense is way better than the Lions defense right now. So that will be the ability to stop the run for the Commanders defense, I think will be absolutely critical here.
I have a crazy stat here from Next Gen Stats on exactly that, Tyler. Saquon Barkley averaged 137 and a half scrimmage yards in his 2 games against the Washington Commanders, right? 137 and a half against the Commanders. That's the second most all time for a single player against a single team since Jim Brown, Tyler, Jim Brown did 147.9 against the Eagles, funny enough, back in the day. But man, yeah, absolutely. Like the Saquon factor in this one, Saquon MVP Saquon, the factor for him in this one is huge for either the success of the Philadelphia Eagles or in limiting the success of the Washington Commanders. It's one of the reasons why I think the Commanders would do well to play keep away as much as possible during this game. Keep the ball in their offense, extend drives, 10-plus play drives, take some time off the clock, and minimize the impact of Saquon Barkley as best you can.
Well, that's all going to be about whether the Commanders can run the ball with consistency. And 180 rushing yards they had. I know that this is kind of cliche because it's the playoffs, but I think Jayden Daniels has to really win on the ground here. I think Jayden Daniels needs to have, I go back to one of the most impressive playoff performances that I've ever seen in my life when Colin Kaepernick ran for like 170 yards on the Green Bay Packers. Nobody thought that San Francisco was going to win that game in Green Bay, and Colin Kaepernick goes in there in the tundra and literally lights them up. I think Jayden Daniels has to do something like that, and let's be honest, that's basically what the season has been. It's been a fantasy Jayden Daniels run here. This is like Madden, where you just have your rookie quarterback you created in the creative player mode, and you brought him out there, and you go all the way and win the Super Bowl. Like, make no mistake about it, if Washington wants to keep the Cinderella story going here, they're going to need their Cinderella to not hit midnight. Like that's what it is. And I think Jayden Daniels rushing for 80 to 100 yards, I think that has to happen. And I'm looking, you want player props. Jayden Daniels over 50 yards rushing. He's going to need to do that to keep that ball and to do the things that you're talking about. So I think a big day on the ground for Jayden Daniels, regardless of whether they win or lose.
I was wrong about James Cook's 55 and a half being the easiest over-under of the weekend. Jayden Daniels 50, that's the easiest over-under of the weekend for sure. And here's the other thing too, along with him not hitting midnight, he's got to make sure his offensive line doesn't turn back into a pumpkin before this game is all over with too. This Washington Commanders offensive line has been surprisingly effective. Over at Peacock and Williamson, one of our other NFL shows here, they ranked the Washington Commanders, Matt Williamson did, as the worst offensive line going into this year. But that's the thing with having a mobile quarterback in this dual threat. He can erase some of those mistakes. Sam Cosmi, of course, was injured last week. And the Philadelphia Eagles like to dial up the pressure, as we've seen. So that's going to be a big thing to watch in this one as well. Not just Jayden Daniels, but making sure that the protection is there for him to be able to extend those plays in the first place.
Yeah, and that may be difficult with the way that Jalen Carter is playing right now in the middle of the
out of his
defense.
mind.
My Lanta, man. He won them that game last week at the end against the Rams. That
literally
was
single-handedly.
Literally. But with that being said, those are the games for the week. Those are the bets that we like, some lines, some player props. But now we're going to turn our attention to some news that you might hear over the weekend with some of these open head coaching positions in the NFL. Do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it be sports, music, theater, comedy. One of my favorite memories from last year was going to a concert. The energy and excitement was unforgettable, and buying my tickets on Game Time for that concert was unforgettable as well. And now Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets to your favorite live events with their new feature, Game Time Picks. The feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. That's not the only great feature that they have on Game Time. Along with Game Time Picks, they also have a panoramic view from your seat, so you know what you're going to be looking at before you buy your tickets. Also, with the app's all-in pricing, you can see the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's Locked On NFL again. create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? It's game time. Today's episode is also brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Growing your small business in 2025 comes down to how well you can hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights. That's where LinkedIn comes in. With the strongest hiring data available, LinkedIn helps you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decision for your business. I've used LinkedIn Jobs myself, and I can tell you it's a game changer. Small businesses are wearing a lot of hats, so every hire is crucial. LinkedIn gets that. That's why they connect you with the best candidates using data that you won't find anywhere else. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find the right high-quality candidates that they were looking for. Hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. All right, football fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We've talked about the AFC matchup. We've talked about the NFC matchup. But now I want to talk about some head coaching positions. We're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys, who seem to be gliding gently further into just a ridiculous decision and situation. But before we dive in, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On NFL your first listen and for being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network. Do want to remind you to hit up the afternoon edition of Locked On NFL with Tony Wiggins in the barbershop as he gets you ready for all of these games and the latest news as well. But we start again, like I said, with the Dallas Cowboys, who I guess, according to reports and rumors, are going to be hiring Brian Schottenheimer as their head coach, their offensive coordinator from last year. And our guys over at Locked On Cowboys talked about this potential move.
That's kind of the really interesting thing about all of this is that, as opposed to Zimmer, right, where you had a guy who was the defensive play caller last year, so he kind of just steps in. I mean, Schottenheimer gives you some of the familiarity, obviously, because he was the offensive coordinator last year, but I have to imagine that he is probably going to, call a little bit of his own offense as well. So if he is the offensive play caller and he becomes the head coach, do you lose a little bit of the continuity that you were hoping to gain by having him as the head coach? There's a lot of questions here, despite the fact that he's, like I said, a continuity hire. But I think that the first question I have is he a serious candidate to be, potentially a head coach? And if so, who are your coordinators? Are you planning on calling plays? Because these are all things that are going to weigh heavily in my thought process of how to feel about it.
I'll tell you how I feel about it, Ross. This is a disaster. Okay. You fired Mike McCarthy, a Super Bowl winning head coach,
right,
who may not be one of the top 10 coaches in the NFL, but is a solid, good NFL coach who got the best out of your team when you had a ton of injuries and no quarterback. And he made the Cowboys look decent with Cooper Rush. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. To fire Mike McCarthy and then to end up with his offensive coordinator. What? Why would you do that? Why would you promote from within? This is insanity.
Yeah, if you want a continuity, then just keep Mike McCarthy in the building. You know what I mean? If that's the play that you wanted, then just keep the continuity. It didn't sound like Mike McCarthy was forcing his way out by any stretch of the imagination. They never even got to negotiations, according to reports. And so this is a really shocking one. I wonder how much, Tyler, the continuity play is really get somebody to just take the brunt of this for the next 2 years, improve the product, and then go and hire the guy you actually want in a later class in 2027 or something like that. I wonder if that's really the continuity that they're after, as opposed to trying to maintain what's already established.
I mean, to miss out on Ben Johnson and miss out on Bill Belichick because you're trying to figure it out with Mike McCarthy, not figure it out with Mike McCarthy and be forced to promote his offensive coordinator who didn't even call plays for you. I mean, just think about the dominoes that have fallen here for Dallas. Ross, you say 2 years. I doubt it's even that. I think this is a
you're
one-year
probably right.
placeholder because they couldn't get anybody that they wanted. Schottenheimer and everybody else is going to be fired a year from now, and then the Dallas Cowboys are going to try to make some other splash hire or finally get Deion Sanders to come from Colorado or pay the $10 million to get Bill Belichick from North Carolina. Like, I don't know how you could be a Cowboys fan and accept this. Jerry Jones just looks like he's losing it, man.
Yeah, man, they've just kind of been doing their own little thing over there, haven't they? Like, they're all the candidates. You saw the Jets and the Chicago Bears. Like, the only reason why you and I didn't interview with them is because we were recording a show when they called. Like, they interviewed everybody. Meanwhile, you watch the Dallas Cowboys, you look at their interview list, and like all the guys that are on their interview list aren't on any of those other teams' interviews list, and they interviewed everybody and everything. It just kind of seemed like they're off doing their own thing in this situation, which is pretty indicative of either, hey, we need a warm body until we're ready to actually sell something, or Jerry Jones is in a position where he's just like, I just want to hire guys that I'm comfortable with, maybe is kind of where he is. But I don't know. It doesn't seem like a genuine situation.
Yeah, either way, it's a disaster for Cowboys fans. But looking at the other three openings that still remain in the NFL, obviously the New Orleans Saints are one of those. And with Ross being our Locked On Saints expert, would be remiss if I didn't ask you where you think the Saints go from here. Who's your kind of leader in the clubhouse right now?
Yeah, I got two different answers. If I'm looking at the New Orleans Saints scope and I'm going through their scope, actually Mike McCarthy is right there for him. Uncontested, waiting. He didn't get the Bears job. No one else has really expressed a ton of interest. He's got history here in New Orleans in 2000 to 2004 as a former offensive coordinator. Been there, done that, the whole thing, right? Experienced coach. He's a safe hire, all that. That feels very New Orleans Saints. But Ross's number one is Joe Brady of the Buffalo Bills. I'm waiting for Joe Brady after this weekend because whether or not the Bills advance or lose, he can at least interview in the bye week between the conference championships and the Super Bowl. And so I'm getting him on the first flight to New Orleans that I can. I don't think there are any directs from Buffalo to New Orleans, but I'll make one if I have to. And that's the guy that I'm going after because I want the young kind of offensive mind so you don't have to deal with the offensive coordinator turnover. A little bit more risky, but I like a little bit of risk in the situation for them.
And quite frankly, I don't think the Saints are close. And I've been saying for a while, they need to take their medicine. And one of the ways that would show me that they are willing to take that medicine and accept their situation is hiring a young, inexperienced offensive play caller and allowing him to grow with a team that you're building into the future. That
many Saints fans. So many Saints fans, I can hear them now. They're cheering at you because of
if they hire Mike McCarthy, it would tell us the opposite. And
no, 100%.
So we will see what happens there. And as someone who wants to hire Derek Carr to steer my team into another top draft pick, hopefully they go with Joe Brady and get rid of Derek Carr. But looking at the other two spots, the Las Vegas Raiders and the Jacksonville Jaguars, obviously talked about the Jaguars on yesterday's show and everything that's going on there. I think right now Robert Saleh, probably the favorite to go to Jacksonville, it seems. He wants to get back into coaching, and, that's a desperate team who kind of just needs a leader. And I think Saleh is a leader, even if he has some issues with, offense and hiring and things like that. And then for the Raiders, it seems like Pete Carroll, maybe, but
not a bad choice he's
a program builder.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing we talked about with Schottenheimer, but probably way more effective, right? Hire him, bring him in, flip your stuff for a couple years, and then sell a better.
But here's my worry with Pete Carroll and the Raiders. The Raiders are not close either. They don't have a quarterback. Their roster is not in a great spot. They need a lot to build up. And I hate to be this way, but like at Pete Carroll's age, is he really the guy that you want to start a program build with? At what point in time during that process does maybe he want to transition upstairs like what they were talking about in Seattle? I just think it's a risky move to start a long-term program build, even though he's known as a good program builder with a guy that age. I mean, he's in his 70s. It just, it's at least worth a question.
Yeah, for sure. What if you hired him in 2025, let him start to begin the building of the program, go and hire a younger guy in 2027, like a young first-time offensive play caller like we were just talking about for the Saints, and then move Pete Carroll into a different position, even within the organization if you wanted to. And then turn things over to the kind of launch of the rebuild, right? Build the foundation with him, but then build up with the young guy.
Well, you could absolutely do that, and that plan works in theory if the guy that he hands it off to is any good.
Right. That's the risk. That's always the risk, right? For sure.
It depends on who he hands off to, but in theory, to kickstart a program that way, I don't think that it's asinine to think of that as a plan. But are the Raiders really, handling things smartly as an organization? Do they have a coherent plan? Maybe with Tom Brady now, the answer is yes, but the answer hasn't been yes. If
they listen to today's show, that was free. They can have that.
Yeah, there you go.
Free and available.
Yep, exactly. All right. But with that being said, after legally advising the Las Vegas Raiders of what they should do in their head coaching search, we will wrap things up. But conference championship weekend is here. Hope you guys enjoy the football. We're going to be back with you. Well, not both of us, but I will be back with you on Monday to recap everything that happens. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's Locked On NFL, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as I tell you every episode, stay safe out there.